Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Elizabeth Pritchard. How are you today, Elizabeth?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much, Desiree.
Wonderful. I am so excited to have you on the show today and for our conversation. Elizabeth, you are quite accomplished. You are the co-founder of WALT Institute, and this is an acronym. Thank you for reminding me of that word before we started the show today. WALT does stand for something, and so I want you to share with the listeners what the acronym is and what you are really helping the global community with this institute. So, Elizabeth, take it away. Tell us how this journey began for you.
Thank you so much. Yes, so WALT Institute stands for Women Authentic Leadership Training Institute. So we began as Authentic Leadership something or other institute, and it was just so long, and then we were talking with our mentors over a glass of wine actually, and going, and one of them said, you have to change the name, and it was like, yeah, we know it's too long. And so he was just playing around with little acronyms while we were chatting and talking about the future of our business. And then he says, well, what about WALT? And I went, pardon? And he goes, WALT, Women Authentic Leadership Training. You're women, you're authentic leadership training. And it was like, gosh, that's really cool. And he goes, because I can see people going, have you got WALT in? Because they're the experts in authentic leadership coaching and training in business and corporates. And it was like, oh. And so from there, our sort of journey of about 3 to 4 years of testing other names. And we started as heroic development, because grow the hero within you. And so we sort of morphed over 3 to 4 years and became WALT Institute. So we're really proud of that. We have coaching, training, in-person, online, do-it-yourself programs, resources, and we also have, my background is research and education as well as a health professional. And so we bring all that together with my other co-founder, Christine Burns, and we also are looking at doing research internationally as well in relation to authentic leadership and those important things of who you are being in your leadership. So that's how the sort of entity came through.
And so for you, how did the journey flow for you? And I know you're a PhD, and so will you share with us how that came to be, what led you to get your PhD, and maybe kind of how the journey really began and led you to where you are now?
Yeah, so I was sort of in the top of my field in occupational therapy in New Zealand. So I specialised in neuroscience and neuro rehab for people who had injury or accident. And I loved that, absolutely loved it. And I sort of got to the stage in my field where I was from Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so it's a small country, about 5 and a bit million people. It was only 4 and a bit million people when I was coming through my training and working as an occupational therapist. And I sort of got to the stage where it's like, oh, what else can I learn? Because I love learning. It's part of one of my personal and professional human needs, really. It's that thing that spins my wheels. And I never realized that, because I always thought I was a dumb blonde, because I got called that so many times when I was a child. And anyway, that's another story. And so, because I used to have long, really, really blonde white hair. And so I sort of believed that, and it was like, oh, I need to extend that to prove myself. And so I did a master's, and it was like, oh, I can actually do a master's. And then I got to the stage of just getting to that stage in my career that it was like, I want to go in a different direction, but I'm not quite sure where or how. And then all these amazing synchronicities just fell into place over the course of 6 months. And part of it was had separated from my husband and was looking for a new direction. I had about 2-3 years earlier gone into a different field. I'd gone into education instead of health, working as a clinician. And it was like, oh, what else is there? What else is there? What else could I jump into and get inspired by and grow and develop? And so that led me to moving countries from New Zealand to Australia and doing my PhD. And all these synchronicities just sort of fell into place. And it was like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. And it was so cool because I stepped into doing the PhD journey because I wanted to, not because I felt I had to prove anything. It was a beautiful moment, really, I think, for me, because it was like, I don't have to prove anything to anyone. And part of that was because I was in my late 40s at that time, moved countries to a place, instead of the whole country being 5 million people, the city's 5 million people, and I knew two. And so talking about jumping out of my comfort zone, being in a place where I was now the novice instead of the expert, that was hugely growing and developing for me, and led me to creating all this other experiences and understanding that I don't just leave on a bookshelf like behind me. Those books are all used, that knowledge is used, and I do and I be the leader every day.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Elizabeth. It's wonderful because I think it shows and we get a sense that anything is possible if we just try. And I love that it was not that you felt you had to do something, but that you really wanted to do something. Maybe initially you felt you had to get this level of education to prove something, but that then it developed into what you really wanted to do. And so I love that you are really showing by example what's possible. And so that's fantastic. And it was interesting that you said that you were in your 40s and you kind of got to a point where you just didn't care. And I think that happens to a lot of women as they age, right? We start to realize that nobody was paying attention anyway. So why do we bother worrying about what other people are thinking or saying or whatever? Because they're not really thinking or saying anything about us. So let's just live our life. But to kind of bring it back to our conversation today, and we're talking about really authentic leadership and women authentic leadership. And so how we can pull this together, I think I want you to share specifically some tips or strategies that the listeners can begin to kind of employ for themselves in how they can thrive and become successful every day.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's a whole lot of little tiny tweaks. So people often get scared off with leadership development. Oh, that means I have to learn all this stuff and identify all these frameworks, and I have to change everything I'm doing because it's all wrong, and I need to be this type of thing because that's what traditional leadership training has often taught us. And so authentic leadership is all about these little tiny mindset tweaks. And this is what Christine and I specialize in particularly. And they're based on positive psychology and the science of well-being. And so it's about the mindset. It's about what we say to ourselves. It's about our congruence with, are our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions totally aligned with who we are being? Do we know who we are? And I say who we are being as well, because it's like, this is a journey that I've been on for the last decade or so. It's like, who am I inside? We all have all these patterns that are part of who we are. And whether you're 20, 30, 40, or 110, doesn't matter. We still all have these patterns from our experiences and the way that we've interpreted life. And they're not right or wrong or good or bad. They just are. They're patterns. And so what I've recognized and what we coach and train on is that we can recognize these patterns because we notice them, and then we can shift them and change them. And we can actually rewire our neural pathways. There's a whole lot of work by Dr. Joe Dispenza and Gary Braden and Bruce Lipton and many others. And it's like, we can actually change the neural pathways, because people go, oh, but I'm always late and that's just the way it is, full stop. And we have all these little sayings. It was like, oh, but I can never do that because it's too hard. Oh, well, that's not for me. I can never stand up and talk in front of people. Whatever it is, they're just blah, blah. And I say this on purpose to disrupt. It's just stuff that we say, that we have believed because we've said it over and over again. And so it has become a belief and a pattern. And once we notice those, we can shift through those and choose a different response. And so the little tiny strategies we always start with is notice. We've just started a 6-week program with a group of people, and it's like the first thing they do is homework for the first week is you notice. You notice, you check in 2 to 3 times a day, and you can set your alarm to do this and just notice. You notice in that moment what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're doing. Because we so often don't do this. And when we notice, and when we do this, we set this up aside without blame, without shame, without guilt, without judgment. We don't judge ourselves, because if we're judging ourselves and saying, oh no, I've done it again. Oh no, that's that pattern again that's coming up. Oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person. And then we go into the spiral of self-hate and self-loathing, and that doesn't serve anybody. And so within that, when we notice, we don't attach any emotion to it. Like this morning, I had major issues connecting with Desiree. And it was like I was checking in the whole time, because I've practiced this. It's like a muscle. I've practiced this over the last decade, and I can do it much quickly. And I know that my heart rate was rising, and I was like, oh my gosh. Now, probably 5 years ago, I would have just about spat the dummy, thrown the computer out the window, and stormed out of here and burst into tears. And I would have done that. I absolutely would have done that, because I was so frustrated. And this time it was like I kept checking in. It was like, and every time I checked in, I did the next thing. I took a breath. And I said, this is beyond my control. It's the internet. And then when I've taken that breath and I've pulled myself down from the ceiling, because I've had that pause, I've checked in, I've been gentle to myself. I haven't blamed myself for going, oh my gosh, I should have, could have, would have. Didn't go down that lane. I didn't wind myself up. I then went, okay, what else can I do? Get another computer. What else can I do? Try hotspotting. What else can I do? Turn this on, turn this back on, notify you, do this, do this. And I went through about 6 or 7 different scenarios, and we're here. However, when we're spinning and we haven't paused to notice or paused to take a breath, we keep spinning. And the psychology around this and the research around this, and this is a wonderful line that we love talking about in our workshops, is that the stressier we are, the dumber we are. And we love saying this because people go, what? I'm not dumb. I'm stressed all the time, but I'm not dumb. How dare you? But it's true, because what happens is our focus gets so narrow, we actually close down our options. We close down our ability to be creative and resourceful. And so if I give 3 little strategies to start with, one is pause and notice. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you doing in that moment? And then the second one is take a breath, because then you shift your state. And the third one is you choose what you want to do next, consciously, purposefully, intentionally.
Oh gosh, Elizabeth, that was fantastic. There was so much stuff that you said in there that I absolutely agree with and love. First of all, the neural pathways and this idea of neuroplasticity and being able to change our thoughts instead of those repetitive things that we've said before, creating new things that we're repeating to ourselves. I love that. And, have encouraged listeners to check that out on their own, because it is fantastic and so fascinating. And the points that you just shared about pausing, taking a breath, and then what's the next step? And you're so right. When we do get stressed out or we're frustrated, not only does our field of vision narrow, but you're right. Like suddenly we can't think of any solution to the problems that we're facing. And so I think that's such a great reminder that if we just take these steps, we can kind of reset and get to a point where we now can explore new ideas to solve our problems, because we're not kind of like focused right here, because we're so stressed, so frustrated. So great stuff.
Yeah, and people think it can't be that simple. And we're like, do it. And we make them do it. I was like, you paid for this course, do it. You'll get the results at the other end. We promise you. That's the bit we promise you. If you do the work, you'll get the result. And it was like we were doing a workshop this week with someone, and she said, we were talking about effective communication, not just communication, blah, blah, but effective communication. And she said, I had this scenario where I went to my boss and I said, I think I'm going to give this person this piece of work. And they said, oh, I don't think that's a good idea. No, I don't think that's a good idea. And she sort of went out the office and went, I thought it was a great idea. It's, I'm the boss of the delegation, and she would fit the role, and she has this experience, and blah, 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 blah. And then she went into story, just like we all do. It was like, oh, and then she started self-doubting, and all of this sort of stuff started spiraling. And I said, so what did you do? She went, so I did it myself and just worked overtime, and I got exhausted. And I said, okay. And she goes, so what could I do differently next time? And I went, fantastic. So this is a great example of the stressor you are, the dummy you are, because she got into that, oh no, he disagreed. And then she went into her own story and jumped into her own patterns. And when we said to her, it's just patterns. It's okay. Ease up on self. It's all right. It's just a pattern. And now that you recognize it, we can help shift that. And so right then, I said, okay, so have a breath. So she did a breath, and we changed state. So change physiology, change your state. And then it was like, so what is another option? And she went, what did she say? She came up with 5 options. She went, oh, I could do this. And I says, what's another option? I could do this. What's another option? I could do this. What's another option? I could do this. And then somebody else said, and you could quit. And they thought they were making a joke. And I said, that is another option. What's another option? And we came up with another 2 options. And so it goes to show, like you were just saying there, Desiree, that our focus can go into up. First of all, we get people to look up as well, because when we're busy and we're stressy, we're looking down. We very seldom look up. And so we can look up, take that breath. And what happens is your shoulders open, your heart space opens, and it's like, okay, what can we do now? How can I be resourceful? What would it take for me to get a different outcome? That's a great question to ask yourself at any stage, especially if you're a leader, but at any stage. What would it take for me to get a different outcome? I could do this. What's my options? This. And you just open up this amazing plethora of incredible options and opportunities, because you've had that moment of pause, breath, choose again.
Yeah. And I love that you just shared also the kind of physiology of what's happening, or the physical stance, and your shoulders back, the head up, and that how that even changes then what goes on in your mind, right? Because of changing the position of your body. And so it's such an interesting point. And I think probably ties in because of your training, right? Knowing the physiology and the physical side of what's happening in your body, and how that also influences what's going on in your mind, I would assume. Yes?
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but yes, because when I'm walking with somebody, when I was doing occupational therapy rehab, so it's totally different to physio, but if we were going through daily life, so I would sometimes take people shopping so that they would use their whole cognitive planning side of things after an accident or an injury, or we'd go and catch the train together so they could plan getting to the train station, buying the ticket, managing money, getting around lots of people, navigating steps. So it was physical, it was cognitive, it was just all of self, because that's what occupational therapy is about. And I just had that moment then. It was like, oh, yeah, it is. Because I'd say, okay, look up, head up, where are you going? And I would. And I'd go, and breathe, because people would get so intense with doing something. I'd go, and breathe. And yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's awesome. That's why I love it so much, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that. Yeah, you do. The excitement about what you're talking about is for sure coming through. I see it, and those who watch on YouTube will see it as well. And I'm sure you can hear it for the listeners. So we're talking about kind of changing our mindset by this kind of physical change. What are maybe some other things that we can do to cultivate resilience and continue to elevate our mindset when we are stressed, or when we are under, pressure, under deadlines, whatever the case may be?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we teach very strongly is that people often think that resilience is bouncing back. So it's like bounce, bounce, bounce up, bounce up, bounce back. I want to bounce back. I don't want to bounce back because back's back there. And to me, and to the psychology of it, bouncing back is to the same shitty situation. It's to the same stuff. It's to the same responses. It's to the same emotions. It's to the same physiology. It's to the same situation and people and things that are going on in their head. I want to bounce forward. So I want to bounce forward like a ball that goes to bounce forward. And to bounce forward, there's some things that we can do within us as well. So one of the things that is really, really useful is to recognize all of those things that you've done before. And as we call it, stack your goodies. So you stack your goodies. I was like, actually, I went through this time here where that happened and I got through it. I'm here today. And then I had this conversation with that person that really floored me. And it really floored me for like 3 weeks while I was getting a bit rocky and I doubted myself and I went through that. And I got through that. Stack your goodies. And then I went through that time when I was going for this job and I thought I was going to get it and I didn't. Oh, and I got through that. And then I went through this time when somebody close to me passed away or died and I got through that. And then I went through this time that I did that and I got through that. And you stack your goodies and recognize the strength that you have within you, because every one of us has this enormous amount of strength. And it starts as a little child. When a child's learning to walk, they sort of get up and they totter around and they fall over, bang, bang on their bottoms. Usually on their bottoms they fall over. Sometimes they topple forward, but usually on their bottoms. And they sort of go, oh, the world's an interesting place. Not quite sure how to do this. And then they get up again and they try it again and they do this again and they do it again and they do it again. And then they go, oh, look, I can walk. Oh. And then they fall over and then they do it again. So the work of Martin Seligman, the psychologist from Pennsylvania University, he talks about resilience being in us right from birth, that we have this ability to keep on going. And when we recognize that ourselves and stack up our goodies, we can then bring that recognition for ourselves through to anything. And I mean anything. It can be a health diagnosis, it can be a death of a loved one, it can be a work challenge, it can be a tricky situation, a toxic environment, it can be anything. And we can bring that through. And the second thing that's so important around building resilience and being able to bounce forward is recognizing your language and your intention. So that's the other two things. Language is so, so powerful. There's this wonderful work by Dr. Emoto where he first discovered that if we say different things to water, the same water, say different things to the water, different language, and then he looked at it under a microscope, the crystals change. And it's amazing. And then he would play classical music to one, rock and roll to another, heavy metal to another, and the crystals would change. And there was another one that they had this experiment in a school where they had cups of rice with lids on, jars of rice. And they said to the children, every time you go past that jar, you say really nice things to it. And every time you go past that jar, you say whatever you like and you say nasty things to it. And what happened over the course of 1 to 2 weeks was that the one that got the nice words was still fine, and the other one had started going moldy and horrible. So powerful, so incredible, so incredible. And what that tells us, I mean, our bodies are made up between 65 and 85, depending which piece of literature you look at, around 70-75% of water. So what are we saying to ourselves? Now, if we want to be more resilient and bounce forward, then what are we saying to ourselves? I know that for me, I would always say, oh, that was dumb, that was stupid, what a dumb thing to do, you're such a failure. I would say this, repeat again and again and again, you don't deserve that. Why would you deserve that? That's just stupid, you're useless. I would say this to myself all the time. And when I recognized that language, what it was doing to me physiologically, as well as emotionally, I was like, whoa, that pattern needs to change. That absolutely needs to change. And so over the course of the time, as I've become aware of it, I tweak and change that language. I look at, I can do language. I am this. I am strong. I am courageous. I can do this. I've got this. Even if I'm feeling a little bit nervous, even if I'm having that little zzz, oh, I'm not sure about this because it's unfamiliar, I don't jump into that language of things like imposter syndrome, because it's this ridiculous label that makes us have an emotional and chemical reaction that takes us down the garden path. I go, oh my gosh, I've never done that before. What have I done that's similar? So I stack my goodies. I know the first time I spoke to an audience of 350 people in a lecture theatre, it was like, oh, I haven't done that before. I was like, oh my gosh, this is scary. And you're on a spotlight. If anybody's ever done it, when you speak in big auditoriums, you're on a spotlight. You can't actually see many people out there at all because the lights are in your face. And the first time, and it was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And then I remember Christine actually taught me this principle, co-founder, taught me this principle to stack up what you do know. And it was like, I've spoken on this topic before. I've spoken to groups of people before. I know what this conference is about. This topic is my topic. I've created this information that I'm going to speak on for the next 15 minutes. It was like the only thing I hadn't done, I'd spoken on stages before, little stages, but the only thing I hadn't done is spoken in an auditorium with 350 or more people. And it was like, so I've stacked up my goodies and I've bounced forward, because it's like I've reframed the words. It's only this little bit of that scenario that I haven't done before. And those two things are just absolutely huge if you take those on board. And for your listeners to recognize that whenever you come up against something, I was like, I feel like an imposter, or I feel a fraud, blah, 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 blah. Recognize the language, throw it out the window. It does not serve you, and go, what have I done? Stack your goodies. And what's that little bit that's unfamiliar? And that bit, you just enlist your courage and go.
Oh gosh, wonderful. Elizabeth, so good. And thank you for pointing out the studies and the books that are out. The one that you mentioned specifically about talking to water and the crystals, like I've just discovered this book myself. It's so fascinating. I will for sure have you give me that information again so I can list it in the show notes, because I want the listeners to check that out, because really this concept is so interesting. And then the point of the rice as well, talking to the two different kind of jars of rice and what that's doing to us internally. Wow. I mean, it can make such a difference in recognizing that the words that we're saying to ourselves really matter. The words that we're saying to others really matter. And just recognizing that. So great stuff. Great stuff. Thank you. I love it. Love it. Love it. Oh my gosh. Okay, where do I want to go from here? So let's talk about.
I'm in your hands.
Let's dive into the authenticity part. And really, I think that we can say the last few years, we've really heard a lot about being authentic to ourselves and the importance of being authentic. So let's talk about that. What are your thoughts, and how can we become more authentic in what we're doing? And if the listeners are leaders in owning a company, they're their own CEO of their own business, or they are a leader in another organization, what are some things that we can do to continue to build our authenticity and how we're working with others?
Fantastic. Yes. So authenticity, I think when it first came through, people were going, oh, that means people can dress outrageously and you can't tell me what to do, and they can say whatever they like, and they can turn up late for work, and they can do whatever. It was like, but being authentic. It was like they saw it as an excuse. That's not what authenticity is about. Authenticity is when you have that massive amount of congruence in everything that you do and be, because we're human beings. So who do we be first? Now, people find this concept a little bit tricky until we go through it many times and you practice it and then you get it. And that's okay, because we often think that it was like, to have this, I need to do that. To have this, I need to do that. So we go have, do, have, do, have, do, have, do, crash, burn. That's what we do. A lot of us, including myself previously. And then I recognized and understood, particularly with my coach, this is what I work on all the time. She's amazing. It's like, who do I be to have that? Because it's not what I'm doing, it's who am I being? And this works if you are a team member. This works if you are a person caring for someone. This works if you are a top CEO of an organization. Who are you being in that moment? Because so many people just go, do, and they're extremely, extremely skilled at it. And that's why they're where they're at. That's fantastic. And not but, because if we go but, we're negating that. So, and there's also this other side of who you're being. Do you recognize what responses you are having, that checking in stuff and noticing? Are you aware and able to self-regulate by dialing up and dialing down certain things? Now, if you're leading a group of people, leadership's about inspiration and influence. To do that, you have to be totally aware of yourself first. Why is it that that particular person, when you're working with them, they flick your switch or push your buttons? It was like, why is it that you really accommodating with this person and that one you're tougher and you just ride their back? Why is it? It's because about you. It's not them, it's about you. And so recognizing who you are being in that moment and consciously, purposefully, intentionally being that congruently with every single action, every single word, every single emotion with what you're doing and who you're being, that is true, authentic leadership. And so we take people on a journey to discover that because it's so, so powerful. True, authentic leaders can rule the world. True, authentic leaders create environments where people want to turn up every day because they know that each other has got their backs. They create environments and cultures that are inspiring, that are okay to make mistakes because it was like, oh, made a mistake. And this is how I think we can fix it. And this is what we could do next time so it doesn't happen again. Because we are allowing people to be themselves as well. And so authentic leadership has 4 components that I'll just quickly go through. It's about self-awareness. And people go, yes, I have emotional intelligence. I'm great. I understand what people are saying. It was like, yes. And then why is it that you have this unconscious bias? And I've noticed that you treat the women differently to the men, or you treat the older people differently to the younger people in your team, because then you're not being aware. You're not aware of the responses and recognizing those. And then it's the self-regulation. It's the second component. And so that's the ability, as I said, to dial up and dial down. So sometimes I can be sort of really laid back and flippant. Other times I dial that down because it's not appropriate. Like right here, right now, I'm sort of in the middle because I'm being me and I'm being enthusiastic. And this is what you see. What you see is what you get. I'm the same here as I am in my home, as I am in the community. I'm the same person. And people think, oh, I have to be different here and I have to be different there and I have to do this here and I have to go into my work persona. That's not being authentic leadership. It's about being who you be in every single one of those things. And people can go, oh my gosh, she is absolutely driven in everything. And she's driven to ease up and rest off as well. Look what she does in a pause down time or her holiday time. And then she's totally driven in the company that she's running. And then she's totally driven over here in the sports field. And then she's totally driven over here with laughter and fun. And so it's like we dial it up and dial it down. We're not being different people in different places. And the third component is psychological capital. Authentic leadership is knowing the psychology of yourself first, and then recognizing the interactions and the psychology of others. That's how we inspire and influence. If we don't understand them, if we don't recognize what patterns are, if we put our heads in the sand and just go labeling and go, that person's really difficult, that person's always going to help out, that one over there, oh, I don't know what they're doing, that one over there is always lazy, blah, 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 blah. If we're labeling them, then we're not having that psychological capital and awareness. Psychological capital is about hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. And these are deep-seated psychological principles that we believe and we are within us. So we can develop those, we can recognize those, we can create and strengthen those on our way through. And then the fourth component of authentic leadership is agency, taking action. And here we either say you do or do not do. There is no try. It's like Yoda. Because we can't try to pick up a pen. We either pick it up or we don't. So within that, there's that accountability, ownership, and responsibility, the above the line behaviors of the authentic leader and the authentic team member as well. And we can then work together to create this incredible company, business, sports team, partnership, whatever it is going forward, when we look at these principles and we have them aligned. What we say, what we're thinking to ourselves, and what we do are all congruent.
Gosh, Elizabeth, amazing. I was nodding along, because everything that you said makes so much sense. Really, truly. And what struck me is that when you get down kind of to the nitty-gritty of all of it, it's inner, it's knowing yourself, recognizing, and it seemed like everything starts with you. And that's kind of what I was getting from everything that you were saying. You're talking about self-regulating, you're talking about just recognizing, and it's inside of you. And being authentic is understanding and recognizing who you are and how you are being. And so it's delicious. I love it. Great stuff.
I love that word. That's a great word. Delicious.
It
Awesome.
just came to me. Yeah. Just because it is really important, and you have stated it through this conversation, so important for us to really look at ourselves and take the time, even if it's just a moment, to come back. And I want to say center ourselves. It's kind of like coming back and just that pause, that breath, you're just recentering is how it feels to me. And I think that's so important. And when we can do that, we can be better. We can respond differently in any situation. So I think that that's great.
Absolutely. Because people often say, my team's this, or they're doing that, or my manager never understands me. And so it's all external. But authentic leadership is about starting with internal first. It doesn't mean you're broken, you're wrong, you're bad. Doesn't mean any of that, because that's just BS. And so we come back to ourselves and go, so how does it affect me? What are my patterns? What am I choosing in this moment? What am I saying to myself? What am I recognizing? And then where am I going to shift to? And we see this ripple effect so beautifully. And it happens across teams, organizations, and also intimate partnerships as well. So it's a little hint here. Because they go, my partner doesn't do this or always does that and blah, blah, blah. First of all, language, we're talking about always and nevers, so universals. Let's stop those, particularly if you're a leader. Let's stop the universals as well for ourselves and everybody else around us, because they're not helpful. Because it's not true 100% of the time. And then it's recognizing, it's like, okay, so let's take the external away for this moment and come back to me. Who am I being in this moment? How am I approaching this one? And it's those patterns, like I said, we go into the person who's the difficult one. As a therapist and also as a coach, well, I don't want to attract this, but as a therapist, I used to be the one that everybody would hand the difficult patients to, quote unquote. Oh, Elizabeth will deal with them. I can't deal with them. They're too difficult. And I would get in there and we would have the best relationship and rapport, and they would get the most amazing results. And it would spin my wheels, because I went in there going, we're going to connect. We're going to create amazing magic together. What do they want? Let's go there. And I just totally went centered on them, not me, and not my response. And we can do this as authentic leaders. We can jump in there and go, okay, right, what is my intention? What do I say to myself before I'm going into this meeting? What am I thinking about each of my team members? What are the labels I've used? Let's flick them away and change them. And it's not just the positive, let's think positive thoughts and happy clappy and everything's sunshine and unicorns. It's not that, because positive thinking does not change who we are being. Positive thinking sits up in the top part of our brain, in the logical, rational part of our brain and our thinking processes. It has to be a feeling. It has to be what we believe within us. And that's where the hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism, It's like it must be within us. It has to be within us, down in here, and where we have our self-belief and our self-efficacy, which is just sort of below our rib cage. We have to feel it. We have to feel that I am compassionate, I am courageous, I am looking at understanding people with compassion, even if they piss me off. Recognize it, call it as is, and then I get to choose again. That's up to me as an authentic leader.
Yeah. And you know what? I really think that this applies everywhere in our lives. It's not just the leader in a company or a manager or whatever. I think this applies in everyday life. If you are raising a family or if you're dealing with a spouse or significant other, I think this applies across the board.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because we always say that everyone is a leader, and everybody goes, no, I'm not. I don't have that a title, and I'm not like them. And it was like, you wouldn't get yourself out of bed in the morning if you didn't lead yourself. So you've put the thinking, the thoughts, the emotions, the actions in place to get out of bed and do something. Have a shower, go to the bathroom, go to work, go down the park, have a coffee, whatever it is, doesn't matter. You've led yourself. Absolutely right, Desiree. Yeah, we all lead ourselves first, and some step into leadership positions. Others do it informally. Others choose not to. However, we all lead ourselves first.
Yeah, great point. For sure. Oh my gosh, Elizabeth, I feel like we could just keep talking. There's so much more that we haven't even touched on. So let me see if there's something else we can get in before we begin to close out the show. How about we talk about assertiveness and empathy as a leader? And again, you don't necessarily have to be a leader in a company. We could be talking about just in your family or in your community or whatever. So let's talk about assertiveness and empathy and how those play together.
Yes. So assertiveness is an interesting one because there was a whole lot. I came through the 70s and 80s in my leadership training and development. Yes, I'm that old. and there was all that sort of aggressive, assertive, passive. There was a whole lot of models around that. And we don't particularly teach assertiveness training as historically it was taught. However, when you are being authentic, you come into any situation with that certainty and confidence. And like you said before, Desiree, you're actually centered. You are. You recognize that you have everything within you just here, right? And just below your rib cage for those who are listening. And that's where your self-efficacy sits. And when you do that, and it's not arrogance or ego, it's not, I'm right, they need to listen to me. We do that so often, particularly in our own social networks and things. It was like, right, and some people do it in their workplaces as well. I'm the boss, you listen to me, do this. And so it's not about that. And when we are going into any situation with that confidence and certainty, we have courage as well. So we have courage for the courageous conversations. We have courage to call out the BS. We have courage to say, to put in boundaries and not go down the guilt track and say, I'm actually leaving at 4 p.m. today, and so-and-so's on call and blah, 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 and I will be back in here tomorrow at 7 a.m. as usual, whatever. And walk out the door without grabbing the, oh my gosh, I'm such a terrible person, and la, 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 and how many hours have you worked for the last 17 weeks, 45 each week or 60 or whatever, doesn't matter, because it's not about justifying and it's not about blame. Because in that moment, you are being confident, you are being certain, you're being courageous, and also check in. You get to check in with your intention. What is your intention? Is your intention to show somebody else up? That's why you made that comment. Is your intention to support the team? That's why you made that comment. Is your intention to boost somebody's strengths even more and get them to flourish? What is your intention in that moment? And communication comes from a place of love or a place of hurt. And this is across the board in every part of our life. Either we're hurting and we want to blame somebody. They didn't get me the information, so I couldn't do my job, so I missed the deadline. It's their fault. So we're coming from a place of hurt. Or we go, they didn't give me the information. I did this, I tried this, I did this, I went and saw them, I stood at their desk, I even did this, I even bought them a muffin and coffee, whatever. I bribed them and I got it on time, whatever. It was like, what is your intention in that moment? And when we look at intention with our courage and certainty and confidence, then we do speak up. We also close up and shut up and listen more, because we recognize that I don't need to compete with these people. We also recognize that what other people think of me is none of my business, because that's the external stuff. That's not me. And so you can recognize, you said that before, Desiree, that we get into the 40s often and people sort of go, I don't have to worry about them. We're teaching and training people in their 20s to recognize that, because what other people think of me is none of my business. And I have the courage to be disliked. If I am this particular role and I need to make these decisions, I will make them. And I'll check in first and prepare beforehand. And this is what we coach and train around this. So the language is different. I think because the language is different, you bring a different part of you that is more authentic, rather than this is the way we say a statement that is assertive, and inside we're going crumbling like quivering in our boots. And so recognizing it comes from our certainty, and that can be developed over time. Absolutely. That is being congruent with everything you think to yourself, think out loud, and everything you say, everything you feel along the way. And that might seem a long way off, but we do it through little tiny tweaks, and as it's just like going to the gym. So you're building the muscle. You're building the muscle. You don't just go to the gym 3 times and go, oh, well, yahoo, I can go and lift 150 kgs in the Olympics now. No. And so you're building the muscle. And that's what the strategies do, to have these little tiny tweaks, recognize, shift. And if you do these little tiny tweaks, 1% a day, 365% in a year. Wow. What growth is that?
Yeah. Good stuff. Oh my gosh, really good stuff, Elizabeth. Again, thank you. I mean, it's just absolute genius. Like all of this knowledge that you are sharing with us, it's a reminder. And for some, maybe they're hearing this for the first time. And so I really hope that they are taking this to heart and recognizing the truth of what you're saying, because it's brilliant. I love it. Good stuff. I think at this point, I would love to have you share. We've mentioned a number of books earlier in the episode. If there are other books that you think that the listeners should check out, if you want to repeat the ones that you suggested earlier, I would love that. Or if there's others that you would like to suggest that the listeners might find beneficial, let's go ahead and have you share those now.
Okay, I've got them here. Something I prepared earlier. One of the ones that I'm sort of wading through is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And I have this on Audible as well as the book, because I like making little notes and things like that. So Dr. Joe Dispenza. This is amazing. If you think you can't change, read this book, okay? Because that's just a BS pattern. Everybody can. We can rewire so many things within our neural pathways and the neuroplasticity, like you said before, Desiree. It is amazing what we know now. And yes, people go, oh, but I'm not an academic. It was like, he has lots of different things that are out. He has lots of YouTube little channel things. He has meditations that actually totally help you shift that neural pathway stuff. Helps you to release things, helps you to step into abundance, helps you to recognize that you can be and create a life by your design. So that's one of the ones that is so cool. There's so many books that, I mean, these are read books and they get pulled out and used and written on all over the place. That's what a book has to do in my world. One of the ones that I personally found incredible was Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And he's also got a sequel out called Living Untethered. I haven't read that one yet, but Untethered Soul. Now, this was hugely powerful for me because of all the the things going through a divorce, I have two grown-up children, and at that time, one of my children basically didn't really have much to do with me for about 10 years. And there was a lot of hurt, and there was a lot of sort of rejection that I felt from my extended family and things as well. And again, it's not them. I learned that it was me, that I need to untether. I need to stop clinging. I needed to, and I get to, and I do this every day, is release the BS that I created around that. Now, what happens around this is like people say, yeah, but they actually did do something nasty, or they actually did create something that they shouldn't have, or was illegal, or whatever, or really hurt you. And it was like, it's not about that. So it's not about excusing what they did. It's nothing to do with them. Come back to you. Come back to being authentic. If I'm to be authentic and help empower women, then I need to be empowered first, because otherwise I'm just a fake. I'm pretending. And it's not until I recognize what I can let go of that I can walk into the light and not hold on to the grudges, not hold on to the pain, not hold on to the suffering. I can actually let it go. And recognizing and understanding that for myself, that growth journey in the last decade or so has been absolutely life-changing. And that's one of the things why I can do what I do now. I recognize all the adversity, all the things that have happened in my life ever since I was a little child, right through, and I can live untethered. I can live without clinging on to all that suffering. Because if I cling on to that, if I cling on to the grudge, if I cling on to what they did and didn't do, or what I believed happened in that situation, then I'm hurting me. And so releasing that and being in that place was absolutely amazingly liberating. So those two books, many books, but those two books have been quite powerful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Great recommendations for sure, Elizabeth. I have read both of those as well, and I think they are fantastic. So I can highly recommend them as well. Love Joe Dispenza and the work that he does. And Living Untethered, I believe he has a chapter specifically on death. Yes?
Yes, I think he does. Yes.
Yeah. And that one was really, really powerful for me, and just kind of opened my eyes to looking at things in a different way. And so I absolutely agree with you. Those are fantastic books to read. How about any podcasts? Do you enjoy listening to podcasts, and do you have any you'd like to share?
I was thinking about this beforehand. I am actually not a podcast listener. And I've been on many podcasts as a guest. And I was like, is that incongruence? I was checking in with myself yesterday. And I was like, for me, podcasting, it's not part of what I do. I listen to Audible books to get things. And I think that might just be the geeky part of me. I come across things that I listen in snippets, and then I go and check that person out, or go and read the book, or things like that. So I hook into things that I find out there, definitely, and listen to bits of them, and then I'll dive into a book or an Audible and get more of the background of things, and more of the understanding of things. So I think that's just part of my personality. That's what I do.
Yeah, and that is totally fine. There are many people who don't listen to podcasts, and that's their choice. And everybody consumes information in different ways. And so it's absolutely like no judgment, right? So, but thank you for your honesty on that as well. Elizabeth, this again has just been fantastic. It's just the information is so tremendous that you've shared with us. I mean, there's so many things I just want to like recount that you shared, but I just can't. There's so many great things that you have said. So thank you for your time. Before we close out, can you share with the listeners where they can find more information about the work that you're doing? If they want to follow on your journey, they want to dig into what you're doing, ask you questions, how would they be able to do that?
It's fantastic. So if you wanted to email me personally, it's elizabeth@waltinstitute.com. So WALT Institute, or one word.com. We have a website. It's actually being updated in the next 3 months, but it's still fully functional. There's some free resources on there. You'll find out more about myself and my other co-founder, Christine Burns. She does sports psychology as well. And because she was a past elite athlete, and so she brings that side of things to our business as well. You can find us on YouTube. There's lots of little mini trainings in YouTube, WALT Institute, LinkedIn, Facebook, all sorts of places, all the usuals. We'd love to see you. You can follow us. You can be part of our monthly Inner Circle membership program if you want to. You'll find information about that on the website. And we just love helping to empower people to step through their patterns and recognize them without any blame, shame, guilt, or judgment, and just create your best life going forward.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I will include all the details in the show notes for the listeners to easily find you. Elizabeth, again, thank you so much. This has been tremendous and an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us and sharing this with us.
Thank you so much, Desiree. It's been an absolute joy. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, we'll talk more soon. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.